Okay, so what we've got here is my character that I'm going to show you guys how to animate. This is one I made a few years ago. Not that you're concerned about that or not, but anyway, there it is. And first of all, for animation purposes, I'm going to have to give you another overview of the user interface so that you can know what your animation tools are. First of all, we have your timeline here. And then we have what's called your rangefinder down here. And the rangefinder, it shows you, right now I'm viewing the frame range of between 1 and 150. That also can be set right here. Well, right here and right here. This is the portion you're viewing. Now, also turns out that my entire timeline is frame 1 to frame 150. But I can adjust this to say 300, and I'm still only viewing frames 1 to 150. But my entire timeline includes everything from 1 to 300. Okay, just so you know. So typically what you'll want to do for your animation is you'll need to decide how long each of these needs to be. How long each shot is, I should say. And once you know how long each shot is, which can be hard in the beginning, but that's one of the reasons that we did storyboards. Then you can designate the proper amount of frames to each shot. Okay. Now, so that's the rangefinder, and then I can click play forward or play backwards. I can rewind to one keyframe, or fast forward to the next, or step forward to the next keyframe, or to the next key, I should say, not keyframe. So if I have my main control selected right now, and if I press S, it's going to turn all these attributes red that are unlocked. And right now my scale is locked. And I know that because they're gray. They're grayed out. Now, S is not a very good way to key things, but it is a way to do it. Now, in my timeline, you'll see that there's a red line now on the on the timeline. And that means that that frame has a key for this selected object. So if I deselect that main control, that red line goes away. That's something that always bites the new guys. Okay. Now, these attributes are red all the time. Doesn't matter which frame you have selected. They're red if there's a key anywhere in time for that particular attribute. Okay. Now I'm going to undo that keying. My attributes are no longer red, so I know that that's been undone. Let's redo it real quick. There's another way to get rid of animation that you don't want, and that's you can select all these attribute names, and then right click on them, and you can click break connections, and then that will disconnect all the incoming keys to tell that attribute what value it should be at what point in time. Okay, so now let's say I was about to jump the gun. Okay, so that's the rangefinder, the timeline, how to set keys with S. You can also, you select a controller or multiple controls, you can key multiple controls all at the same time. I'm going to select just my main control. And if I press Shift W, it's going to key just the translates. If I press Shift E, let me undo that. If I press Shift E, it's going to key only the rotates. Okay, undo that. I can press Shift R and it would key only the scale attributes. Now my scale attributes are locked, so it can't key them. But I can't remember if I showed you guys how to lock or unlock attributes. It can be pretty handy. I'll just show that real quick. If you select one or more attributes, you can right click on them and then say lock selected, and then they'll be locked, and you can't key those. They're not animatable. And then to unlock them, you would just select them again and then unlock selected. Okay. Now it's important. This you do not want to forget or miss or overlook. In your animation preferences, which you can get to with this little icon with the looks like an animated stick figure inside of a window, you'll want to set your playback speed to real time. Most likely all of your characters are simple enough, and by default this is set to play every frame, and most likely your characters are all simple enough that Maya can crunch through and animate your character blazingly fast, which is not going to be accurate to time. So you'll need to make sure you set this to real time, 24 frames per second. If you were working towards a feature and you were trying to line up your animation with video, like a special effect, then you would want to change this to 30. So then you can just say other and then change your speed to 30 frames per second. Okay. And then you have this option to tell it to loop once, oscillate, so go forward and then backward, forward and then back, or just to play continuously or loop it continuously. So typically I just leave it on once. If you're doing a cycle, meaning that you're creating an animation that ends the exact same way that it began, so that, like, let's say you want to make your character walk, then you would want to put this on continuous, and then you could see that loop and you could see it walk continuously, and we call that a cycle. Okay, so this is important in here. I'm going to turn it back to 24. So 24 is for like your feature animation stuff. Click save. Okay, and then the last really important GUI item that you're going to need to know about in Maya, or user interface item, is the animation editor's graph editor. And I know we went over this briefly before, maybe right in the very beginning of class when we were animating. At least I think we did. If not, this is the graph editor, and your keyed information will be present in here. So my current time selection is, if I scrub the timeline, then it shows me where that is in the graph editor with the red line. If I were to set key, then it adds a black dot at that point in time where the red line is at. So if I translate this in Y, raise him up a little bit, and then key it again on frame 90, Shift W. Now here's my animation curves. And Y is always green, so you have X, Y, and Z. X is always red, Y is green, and Z is blue. So here's my animation curve, And I can select that, middle mouse click it, and then move it if I want to. And I can adjust my animation that way. In fact, you can see him moving around in the background there. I can even adjust in time where in time that key is at. Okay, and again, that's a middle mouse click, which okay. Now, every now and then it's useful to be able to set these precisely. Well, if you select a key, then you can go up here to this stats section. The first one is the frame number, and the second one is the value for that key that you have selected. So a key is a black dot in time, essentially. Okay, we'll use this more descriptively here in a second. Now, another thing that's really useful in the graph editor is over here on the left, you have something that looks similar to the outliner. Well, you can select and view only the curves that you want to view over here. Or you can see all the curves for that particular object by selecting the object's name. So I'm going to select just the Y, translate Y. And if I select this particular key, I can click or drag select over it, then I can change its tangents. That's these purple handles. So I can tell it to how these handles should behave. And this can become important as well. Okay. And you can break those as well if you want to. So they're unified right now. We can break them, and then I could edit one individually. So this may be useful, like if I wanted him to hit the ground really hard and then just lay there, then he can come into this and then hit the ground, bam, and then he's just going to stay there. Okay. Anyway, so that's a thought. Okay, so that's the graph editor. And I believe that's going to be all I need to do for overview purposes. Next, I'll do a little demo of try to create a little walk cycle and explain how that's done. Just so you know, cyclical animation is the hardest animation there is to do. And in particular, kind of like for the same reasons that modeling humans is hard, doing animation cycles that we are very familiar with, like walking and running, are the most difficult thing there is to do because we're all very familiar with them. Okay. I guess there's one more point is for overview. You can animate anything that has an attribute in Maya. So I can animate the visibility, for instance. I can animate it and turn it on and off with the animation. I can select my camera by clicking on this little icon right here, or I could select it from my outliner or from my hypergraph. So I've got my perspective camera selected because I clicked this little icon. And I have these attributes, and you can watch these change as I navigate around in the channel box. And so I could key the animation of my camera very easily just by selecting the camera and then moving the camera where I want it to be. Press S on frame 90, and on frame 1, let's say I wanted to be looking at him over here, then I can press S again, and now I've got animation on my camera, and that's what it looks like. Okay, not very good. Okay, so I don't want to leave that animation on my camera because I'm not animating my camera, and I believe most of you guys have static shots, meaning the camera's not going to move. If you do animate the camera, then you want to be very aware that it's of the tweening, which we'll get into the next tutorial. Okay.